We're making a behind-the-scenes video for photoshopping. We're sort of part way into the festival circuit, so we thought it might be interesting for some people who've seen the film now to find out a little bit more about how it was put together. So my name's Brian Barnes. I've done some exec producing on this and also the post-production.
My name's Mark Davenport. I'm the writer and director of Photoshopping.
My question to start with really is, how did you first get the idea?
The idea came around really from being on a lot of sets myself, a lot of film sets, and meeting people who are very similar to the character that Joan plays in the film, Elaine. Very often you would be on a job and somebody would appear and find you on a location and ask, where is such a body, where is a certain actor, or they would help you with equipment, and then you would do a completely different job in a completely different location, and the same people would somehow find you. And I thought it was very interesting that they kind of could track you down. The idea really solidified, I suppose, when I spent a bit of time around Coronation Street, and I used to see the same people outside the gates of Coronation Street all the time with the cameras and the notepads looking for the actors. And I just thought, what a strange existence to kind of do that every day, to try and find these people every day. So I just thought it would be interesting to investigate what happens behind closed doors with these people, what do they do, what is their kind of hobbies and their pastime. So that's where it kind of came from, really. And strangely enough, talking to Joan and Paul whilst we were prepping the film.
That's the actors?
The actors,
yeah.
Sorry, Joan and Paul. Joan Kempson and Paul Simpson. They both mentioned that they had similar encounters with people. The same people who would come back for autographs or just act in a slightly peculiar way towards them in terms of what they were after. So I think it's more real than people think. Paul was recommended to me by a couple of people who'd worked with him. Paul Simpson, who plays Michael David, the journalist, and he had the kind of the face fitted, the age and everything else. So I met him in a bar in Manchester, and we just got on really well. He really liked the script. He seemed to understand kind of what it was all about and what he was getting at. As I mentioned earlier, he'd met these types of people himself, so he understood the kind of the idea behind it, really. And yeah, I don't think I even asked him to read. I think I just thought he had the accent, he had the awareness and the confidence that I knew he'd be right for it, really. So we just talked it through a little bit. So he was on board first, I think, and then I looked at a few people for the main character. No one quite fitted what I wanted, and then Joan was recommended to me by somebody as well. I saw a picture of her, and I could see how I could kind of shape her into being what I wanted. And I went down to London to cast her, met her again over a coffee.
Does she live in London now?
No, she lives in Manchester. I think she's got a place in Manchester and in London, but she was doing a theatre piece in London at the time. She was in a play in London, and she'd been in this play for 3 or 4 months. So I think was doing quite well. So I went down to see her, one of her, I think it was between performances actually, it was morning and afternoon performances. And again, she immediately kind of worked. I think you do get a feeling for somebody, and she was just spot on, really. And she said she loved the script and the character, and her enthusiasm won me over, but I could just see, talking to her, that she could nail it. And then we met up a couple of times. I got them both together at my house, actually, and we actually blocked it through and rehearsed it months before we shot it, which I think was really helpful. Just whittle through a few script ideas, and they told me things they didn't like or didn't work, and we kind of worked through those. And they've just bounced off each other brilliantly, so there was never any going back with those two. They were just perfect for it.
What were your biggest challenges in making the film?
I think the biggest challenges are keeping the momentum going once the wheels are in motion. Once I'd written the piece, I'd showed it to people. They seemed to enjoy it and like it, but obviously there was a lot of challenges when you're starting with no money at all. I.e., how are you going to raise the money? How are you going to get people involved? How are you going to get people like Fern Britton involved? So the challenges were making it a reality and making people believe that what was on the page could definitely be achieved on screen, starting at point zero, really.
We've both got quite a lot of contacts in the industry, and a lot of people gave their time and energy for free.
Yeah.
But inevitably, in the making of any film, there are things you need to pay for. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a bit about the IndieGoGo part of the...
Yeah, well, IndieGoGo came around because we were, as you say, we have a lot of contacts, so we were very keen to get the best people we could together to obviously work on the piece, and I would say 50-60% of the crew were achievable just through having very close colleagues who trusted us, and we trusted them because of the work relationship over the years. So a lot of them worked for free and wanted to give their time because they believed in the film as well. But we still needed to raise money, obviously, for, you've got your locations, you've got certain costs for accommodation and things like that. Feeding the crew. Yeah, that's the important one, yeah. So feeding the crew. A hungry
crew is not a very good crew,
absolutely,
is it?
No. And we did make sure that we fed them well and looked after them well in that respect. But yeah, IndieGoGo came around. It's basically crowdfunding. There's lots of those sites seem to be around now, but it's a very good site, and we researched it quite a lot before we went into it. And they said that the most successful kind of campaigns on IndieGoGo are those that have very good perks. So the perks, for example, you can say if you donate $10, it's American, so if you donate $10, you would get a copy of the DVD of the film. If you donate $50, you get a signed autograph from Fern or something like that. We didn't actually do that one, but that's the kind of thing you can do as a perk. So we researched it a lot and made sure that the perks were really strong, and then you basically sell your campaign, and then we just pushed it all the time. So we were literally doing it for about 4 or 5 months. Every night we'd just be always pushing it.
But the great thing was that Joan had lots of willing actor friends, didn't she, who appeared in shot with her. Yeah. And in fact, that's one of the things that we did prior to shooting, to build up the IndieGoGo vibe and to get more and more people interested in the project. Joan was really good in having the occasional photographs taken with fellow actors, like outside Coronation Street and things like that. So we were able to use some of those stills in the run-up to shooting to actually generate interest in the film.
It helped in a great deal to generate interest because people could see these faces, and these people were being involved and kind of endorsing the film, really. So yeah, it was really helpful.
So many thanks to all the actors who helped with that.
And I think that is, in answer to your question earlier, is the hardest kind of thing, is to keep things going all the time, because you wake up in the morning and nobody else is kind of going to do it for you. You've got to do it. So that's the hardest challenge, to keep seeing it through till you get to that point.
So how did all the stuff pan out on IndieGoGo? I mean, ultimately...
Just under 2,000 actually in the end. We got to a certain point where I think we perhaps exhausted our contacts, friends, and those outside parties that were interested. Possibly at that point we could have maybe added a bit more to the campaign to push it more, but then it was getting closer to the shoot. And
then you need basically to keep some of your energy back for actually making the film, don't you?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And I think we got enough out of it to get to a certain point, and we did have a couple of local businesses that I've worked for who contributed a bit of money as well. So I think we achieved the budget we wanted. So
I mean, basically that couple of £1,000 really just oils the wheels, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah, it does.
Feeds people, gives you a bit of budget to buy things that you can't achieve with people donating and things like that. Yeah. But it's interesting, some of the feedback we've got from showings, either festivals or whatever. I found it very interesting that a lot of people really enjoy watching the film, but when it comes to voting for it, for the film of the night or whatever, people, certainly the one I went to, said, oh well, yeah, we really enjoyed photoshopping, but because it was such a massive budget and had such a massive professional feel to it and everything, we voted for something that was perhaps more homemade and obviously a little bit less professionally put together, which I thought was ironic, because we weren't given the opportunity at that particular viewing or festival to say how much it cost. And I think, for me personally, I think on screen it does look $1 million per, I think, for all the reasons, cast, professionalism.
Yeah.
I think the way you've crafted the script is really good. Every aspect of it I've enjoyed working on and being a part of. But I think at festivals and so on, it's great if people know exactly how you've made it, because I think personally that puts a whole different slant on it.
Yeah.
The fact that we've achieved so much with so little money is quite amazing, really.
No, I agree, and I think it's a backhanded compliment, isn't it, for someone to say that at a festival. And I remember you telling me about it, and it's frustrating that you can't stand up and say, look, this is actually how much it cost. And what you're seeing on the screen is hard work and lots of preparation and details before we went into shooting, and a lot of people's free time.
So tell us a little bit more about how you got Fern involved.
Obviously Fern plays herself, or maybe an exaggerated version of herself, but so she was always in the script, so that was the number one target, to get her. And we sent the script to her agent, really, speculatively, and they replied within a few weeks and said that she was interested and she really liked the script. So then it was a matter of, corresponding with the agent and just filling them in on details as we went along. And I think we needed quite a long period of notice before we could get her to actually commit to the dates, but she was always on board when she was interested, and she proved to be fantastic, really.
I think she's just got the perfect balance of hamming it up slightly on camera, but not going too far. I just think every aspect of her working on the film was great. She came up, didn't she, and sort of stayed in a hotel for a couple of days. And
she's great. She drove up. I mean, we offered all kinds of things, but she wanted to come up herself, and I think she was just interested in the process. And she's somebody who's interested in new things herself. And I think she's somebody who, if she believes in it, will invest time in it. And she's very supportive and a fantastic sport in every sense, really, and just a lovely person. And I think she's a good actress as well. I mean, it's not easy to play yourself. People think it is, but it's not easy. And
I struggle every day playing myself.
It's not easy, and I think she did it well. She understood what was required, and she brought new things to it, and new ideas, which were always better, really, and helped. But at the same time, she took direction well, and she was professional. So. But
it was her acting debut, wasn't it? In effect?
In effect it is, her acting debut. I mean, I think she did some drama acting a long time before she was.
But she's obviously best known as a
But she's best known as a TV presenter, very well known as a TV presenter, obviously. Well loved in that respect.
And now a Strictly Come Dancing
participant as well, yeah. So, no, that's the kind of the area she's known as, but I'm sure she could turn her hand to it, because she did really well in the film.
I don't know if you know, but photoshopping has been elevated even more now, apart from the fact that we won an award for Best Comedy in the Aesthetica Film Festival. Mm-hmm. If you search Fern Britain on Wikipedia, photoshopping gets a mention.
Oh, okay, right.
Which I thought was quite interesting.
That's great, yeah.
Interesting when you put things out there, how things connect and start to migrate together on the internet.
Yeah. At this stage, it's not been online yet, and we're holding back the film at the moment. We've got a trailer out there and the behind the scenes, but if it's on Wikipedia and eventually when we put it online, obviously, hopefully more and more people will see it, be exposed to it.
We've just been chatting this morning about, as things are growing, we're thinking about entering into foreign festivals. So we think perhaps the next stage will be to get it translated into German, possibly French. So that's another thing. It's quite interesting how you feel the dynamic of the film has grown, if you like, or the momentum of the film has grown as production's been going along, and also now it's out there.
I think IndieGoGo helped initially, because obviously we were pushing it out to lots of people to try and donate money, and that spreads the word. And I think we got a couple of ads and some articles published in some papers about local businesses in Manchester that were contributing some money to it. And I think once the film was made, we spent a period of showing it to the crew and keeping it quite local. But as we've sent it to festivals, it started to build up momentum. It's won an award now. It's been in some very good festivals already. There's still many more to come, hopefully. And I think quite positively through a lot of word of mouth as well, which is good. People saying they've enjoyed it, they recommend it. I know a few people have got in touch who I've never heard of, who just got in touch to say they'd seen it through somebody else and asking questions about it and so on. And I think you have to use the resources now. You have to use
social
networking and everything else, because that's the way the message is kind of, you know, translated to everybody now, and you can't just sit back and think it's just going to sell itself. You've got to get out there and use these things.
No, it's actually gone down in some festivals, and in fact we went to the Aesthetica Film Festival on the opening night and sat and watched the film, you know, in a cinema with other people. So how do you feel that it's actually being received by the audiences?
Well, the ones I've been to, good. I mean, they seem to appreciate the film. Watching it with the fresh audiences is the best way, and they have responded really well, found it funny. It's been strange to see which festivals it has got into and which it hasn't, and I think it's been a learning curve in terms of to realise that there are many reasons why a film is liked or not liked on different festivals, and that it's not always objective, and it's not always detrimental to your film to not be in one or to be in another.
Well, each festival seems to have its own agenda.
Exactly, they do have their own agenda, and I think that's got its place, because I think it's important to have different, you know, niches for different films. And don't forget, there's a hell of a lot of things being made as well. But I think the response has been great, and I found it interesting that in certain areas of the country it seems to be better. I mean, it's quite a northern film in terms of context and the dialogue and, you know, the accents of the characters, the setting. So it's done well in certain places, very well, and been really well received. It did well in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. It did well. Went to Foyle Film Festival, but it was also then taken to Belfast off the back of that, screened there on the road show with a lot of winners of a recent festival. So it seemed to do well up there, and it's done well in the north of England and in Yorkshire. And comedy films as well, I think, have their place in certain festivals as well. I mean, some do categorise comedy separately to drama. So I think dramatic kind of films with maybe a deeper meaning maybe are what a lot of festivals are looking for. How do you feel the film's been received, and how do you feel it's doing?
Yeah, I think it's about the momentum that generates as you go, and of course the more festivals it goes into, the more people start to talk about it, and obviously when you win an award it generates more interest as well. And it's really, really nice sitting in the audience. After all the hard work that we've put in, it's really nice to just sit in the audience and watch people around you laughing, you know, like you said, you know, laughing where you expected them to laugh. And sometimes where you don't. You know, sometimes people find things funny that, you know, you haven't scripted, which is nice as well. It gives you an extra layer of experience, doesn't it? Hopefully, if we get invited to some festivals in Germany or France and they're going to pay for us to go, then we can go and see how a foreign audience might react to it.
Absolutely.
What do you think about the technicalities, how it's viewed? That is, when you go to a festival or it's when it's shown. What about the quality of, you know, the projection systems and?
Oh, it varies, I think. I mean,
Aesthetica was really good, wasn't it?
Aesthetica was superb. They went to town in terms of making sure that you know, it was high definition and the auditorium was geared up properly. It varies because certain places are set up to do things a certain way, and they don't always gear it towards your film, because very often, you know, things are shot differently or graded differently, and they need to be balanced so that they'll work when you screen it. So I think it varies, and I've had different experiences, some good, some not so good.
I think from my point of view, though, I mean, obviously as the online finisher and grader, I want the film to be as pristine as it possibly can be. And part of my satisfaction has been when we've gone to festivals and seen it up against other films, I'm really impressed with how the quality comes through, and I think that a lot of that's down to using the red. You know, it really does stand out sometimes against some of the technical quality that some of the other films have done. I mean, I think generally in festivals, it's the creativity and it's the content content is king, isn't it? Always will be.
Yeah.
So sometimes, even if it's been shot on a camcorder or a relatively, or even a mobile phone these days, because obviously mobile phones are HD, and some people have actually entered festivals or competitions by, for instance, Nokia, and actually made the whole film on a Nokia phone. And if you do it in the right way, as long as the content's good, then it's a great film. It's really watchable. But to actually, assuming that the creative content's on a par, I still think that to have something that's nicely put together technically and well crafted, it just takes the film to another level. But I'm old-fashioned in that respect, I think.
Yeah, no, it's obviously you want to see it at its best, and it's frustrating when it isn't shown at its best. So, and I think when it has been shown properly, it does hold up very well. So, I agree with that.
Because ultimately, when you go and see it in a cinema, it is a big screen experience.
Yeah.
And unless things are set up right, it's not necessarily going to have the same impact, is it?
Yeah.
Or the same enjoyment for the viewer, shall we say? We've decided to do a bit of a slight trimming, haven't we, of the film? Can you comment a bit on that?
Yeah, well, two reasons. I think we went away from the film for a while in terms of waiting for the festivals to come around, because they can take some time after we finished it. So it's probably quite a while, maybe over 6 months since I'd seen it last on the big screen, and then watched it and realised that in hindsight some areas feel a little bit clunky, maybe only a couple of places a bit slow, and I think that's the benefit of hindsight is with films, is that you can do that. Sometimes you can be too close to it. I'm only in a couple of places, so what I think we both felt that you could just reduce it a tiny bit. And also a lot of festivals, well, I'd say maybe 30% of the festivals around are interested in having films under 15 minutes. And although our film is less than 15 minutes without the credits, they include the credits, so it just runs over at the moment. So we just re-edited it, and I think it actually flows better now. And as I say, we've got a broader scope to send it to festivals. So.
Obviously, I've been heavily involved in the post-production process, because that's one of the things I enjoy doing.
We have a shot. In fact, I think it's on the screen behind Brian there.
Yeah,
is showing off the photographs, which are supposed to be over 3,000 photographs that the characters had taken with all these different celebrities. Obviously, there's certain constraints on how many pictures we could have. I mean, we had a lot of frames and a lot of photographs, but a lot of duplications. And we got to a certain point where we'd fill the walls to a certain capacity with the budget we had. And I wanted to show her world in a really wide shot, so I didn't want to compromise the shot by not having enough frames. So we deliberately, whilst shooting, left a space along the wall where we couldn't fill with photographs, that we knew we would add photographs in post. So the process was of using Photoshop to in a film called Photoshopping to put in photographs, which is quite ironic. But then we handed it to you to try and do that, so you could tell us how about.
Yeah, we got the Photoshopping artist to create us some extra photo frames, basically, and then I matted those in. You also shot with and without the room lights.
Yes.
And remember, you wanted the ceiling shot without the light on.
Yeah.
But you wanted the illumination that the light gave the room and the photo frames and so on. So we basically matted in a ceiling where the light wasn't on, and we also added all the extra photographs in the wide shot. So it looked like there were a lot more photographs than there really were.
I think it worked really well. It was very believable. It's exactly what I was after.
Maybe we could chat a little bit about shooting on the red. I mean, obviously, it's just a fantastic image at 4K. When we did the master was made in 2K, and then that slightly down to HD. I mean, the red really is, to some extent, the standard for cinema or feature film production. Yeah. Why did you want to use the red on this?
I work in cameras, so I understand a lot of what's out there, because there's some fantastic cameras in there. I think the Alexa's a fantastic camera, But at that time, the Red was one of the leaders on the market, and I had the option of having one for free. So a friend of mine who owned one was able to give it me at weekends only, because obviously you hired it out. So obviously getting it for free was a big factor, but being able to shoot at 4K and then decide later what you wanted to do with it was an important factor as well. I knew the camera pretty much inside out anyway, so all those things just said it was a no-brainer.
We even had two in the running scene, wasn't it, in the shopping centre? Yeah,
well, somebody else who I knew of who had one, I had got involved in the crew and given them the opportunity to do some operating in return for having their camera, so they jumped at the chance. So we ended up having two because we needed to get... There's a lot of coverage in the shopping centre, there's a lot of extras. In order to achieve the day and the time scale, we needed to make sure that we could capture everything. So I think we used it in about 4 different setups. We had a second camera. Obviously, it's moved on a few generations since we used... That was the Red 1 at the time, and now we're into the Epics and the
5K
and the 5K Epics. So it still holds up really well, and when it will do 4K. So I think it's a great camera. Yeah.
Also, you used was it a 7D in the house scenes?
Yes, because of certain logistical problems, we had to use a 7D. For example, we have a shot outside of a trunk case, which is part of the story, and we wanted to just peep out of the trunk as if it was almost like a POV. So we couldn't get the camera in there, so I had to use the 7D to get that shot. And we also used it for a couple of actual shots in the story, a couple of still shots that are used in the film. Some shots in the title sequence, which were macro shots, we had to use the 7D just to achieve the macro element.
Because you didn't have the required lenses for the Red?
We didn't have them in the kit that we had for the job, so we had to use the 7D just to make sure we could get the shots that we required. Yeah.
I mean, one of the challenges in post was the shots cutting from the 7D to the Red camera. Took quite a bit of grading to get right.
No, well, I thought Sublime did a great job, really good job on that, and it all matches really well. I mean, you can't... It's incredible when we got the rushes back how different it was.
The DOP, Dan, he said that one of the problems was he still wanted to try and get a smaller depth of field, but of course with the 7D compared to the Red, he didn't have that on that particular shot. Yeah. So again, in post, I put some vignettes in and just blurred here and there just to try and give it a similar feel to the Red camera. Yeah. And although when I watch it, there are still things that stand out to me. I think it's from the viewer's point of view, it works really well. I think
from the viewer's point, it's great. I mean, it's subtleties really, and I think as a technician, you'll always spot how you could do better. But I think the subtleties are there, and you really struggle to see any joins. I think it works really well.
I think I'm bored now.
Yeah, no, I've had enough. I hate being on camera.
I know.
I absolutely hate it. But it's probably worth it.